Welcome to Brainfluence. I'm Roger Dooley. Today we have not one, but two guests. Joining me from Holland, we have Bas Wouters and Joris Groen, authors of the book Online Influence. It was first published in Dutch, but now it's in English. And I have to say, it is a really fascinating book. It is just jam-packed with info and lots of illustrations. It's a great read for any digital marketer. And I'm going to let Bas and Joris introduce themselves. Bas, you go first.
Yes, thank you, Roger, for this great introduction. Yes, my name is Bas Wouters. I'm an entrepreneur who became really fascinated about behavioral science and the practical applicability of behavioral science. I've been personally trained by Dr. Robert Cialdini, and I'm one of his 14 certified trainers in the world. And also I've been trained by Fogg, and like you mentioned, the author of the book Online Influence, which I used in my own companies to build nice businesses.
Joris?
Yeah, hi, I'm Joris, psychologist and UX designer. I've always worked in UX, founded a company, Buyer Minds, and yeah, we were specializing in what we call behavior design for the online world. And currently I'm working and designing at booking.com, trying to make the chatbot more persuasive in helping people to make bookings in Facebook Messenger. And also the co-author, of course, of Online Influence.
Yes, it seems like Booking is quite into behavioral science, from what I can tell. At the last international conference I attended was in Texel, as Tone Wesseling's Conversion Hotel, only this one was called it something else, conference. And there were some folks there from Booking, including the director of experimentation, forget his name. But,
Lucas.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And so, yeah, very, very interesting stuff. We'll make it into some of the ways that Booking uses these techniques. But first, one thing that I loved about the book was that it builds around BJ Fogg's Fogg behavior model as a framework. I turned Fogg's model with a little bit of modification into my own persuasion slide framework, because I had a few different objectives with that. But to me, that is a great fundamental way of thinking about any kind of influence or behavior change process. It's such a simple concept, but into that, then you can insert things like Cialdini-based influence principles into the motivation side, or what BJ would call motivation. And so whoever wants to take this, I've explained the Fogg behavior model occasionally to my listeners and viewers, but what have you, try and sort of summarize how that concept works, recognizing that we have audio listeners who can't see it, they can't see the nice little illustration in the book.
That's great that you asked it, because we did a training, the Tiny Habits certification, and we were actually trained to explain the behavior model in 1 minute. I can do it in 1 minute if you want.
Go for it.
The behavior model says that every behavior, every small behavior, big behavior starts with a prompt. And prompt means something in the outside world that asks you or reminds you to do this behavior. So people don't do much stuff just on their own account. But then there's two other conditions. One is motivation. So this prompt will only ignite behavior if there's enough level of motivation. You have to really want to do it. And the other factor, it's often overlooked, is ability. So maybe people are motivated, but it's just too hard. So ability has to do with how hard or easy behavior is to do. So, and that's it. And one more thing, that's motivation and ability are like communicating vessels. So if you are very motivated, the behavior can be a little hard. You still will do it. But if you're not so motivated, we can still persuade you by making the behavior extremely easy. And yeah, this is the foundation of behavior design, and looking to behavior in this systematic way really helps you to boost your results in any field.
Mhm. Right. And of course, Cialdini is famous for his first 6 and then more recently 7 principles of influence. The first 6 have been with us for 30 plus years. Both BJ and Bob have been on the show before, and I'd encourage our audience
Really?
members who want to dig in a little bit deeper to find some of those past episodes, because it's great to hear those words from the masters themselves. And indeed, they are both masters of behavioral science.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I know they bring up every time, and you have mentioned in the book as well, is ethical persuasion. I'm gonna get this sort of up front rather than leaving it for the end. Often this is an afterthought to discussions of persuasion, where it's like, oh, by the way, be sure you use these techniques in an ethical manner, because doing so in an unethical manner would really be bad. But just to sort of get that cautionary tale in first. Who wants to talk briefly about the ethics of using the techniques that are in the book and that we'll be talking about?
Yeah, I'd like to answer
Yes.
that question, Roger. Of course, the ethical side, and probably has been mentioned a lot of times in your show, it's really important, first of all, to use these principles ethically. But we always say the science itself cannot be ethical or unethical. It's science, and this is how we make choices, and this is how behavior comes to light. But the way of using it, we are big advocacies of using this in an ethical way, of course, because it bounces back as a boomerang if you don't do this. In our book, we describe 6 questions or 6 ways you have to ask yourself if you are doing things ethically. And I think it's really important that people realize these things. And one of them is a pretty obviously one, but it is like, do you tell the truth? Would you tell this to your father, mother, brother, or sister? And also, is it wise? That's also my favorite question. Wise means, if this person say yes to my request at this moment, will he say yes to another request in the near future? And if your answer is no, probably it's not a good thing to make the request right now.
Right. And yeah, I think that's a basic principle, Bas, that if you are going to induce somebody to do something that they're going to regret a day later or 2 days later, then you're probably not persuading in the right way. And I think the truth thing is important too. And I guess there's shadings of truth, because, for instance, something that you see on travel sites, obviously, I guess there are these scarcity queues. There's only 2 rooms left at this price. Now, clearly, there can be totally false scarcity queues. There was an academic paper, I don't know, a year or 2 ago that looked at some of these things, and they found that in some cases, the site always said the same thing. It didn't matter what time of day it was or when it happened, or if you bought them, there were always only 2 left. And so that was clearly lying. Then you've got these sort of shadings of truth. Well, there's only 2 left at 200 euros, but there might be 2 more at 200 euros and 20 cents or something like that. And then there are others where, it is true, there are only 2 left, or yes, there's more rooms, but those rooms are going to be, 220 euros, which for the consumer would be a significant difference. So, I think that I don't want to belabor the ethics point, but it is important to try and use these things not in a manipulative way, but in a way that will end up getting your customer to a better place in their life, not something that they would regret.
Yeah, exactly. And especially, it's always about scarcity principle somehow, this discussion, because it's so powerful, and it's also really tempting, I think, for companies to be a little bit creative with the scarcity.
Well, scarcity is more easily manipulated, I think, than say social proof. You could lie about having 20,000 customers for your software, but you couldn't really, sort of just fake it and say, well, yeah, it's not really 20,000, it's really 2,000, but I can say 20,000 because of X. You're either lying or you're telling the truth in that case. But scarcity can be adjusted pretty easily.
Yeah, you can create it basically by changing a price for a limited amount of products, or just yeah.
Or time even, I like if, I don't sell training programs, but I've seen certainly people selling training programs and, there's, only 24 hours left to take advantage of this deal. And
Yeah,
then,
exactly.
maybe in 2 days later, there's going to be another 24-hour window. Who knows? But,
Yeah.
you can manipulate scarcity a lot more easily than you can manipulate some of the other principles. So what, one of the things that I found, obviously I'm familiar with, a lot of the examples in the book, but something that either I hadn't seen or perhaps saw it and so long ago that I have forgotten seeing it, was a way of using authority. And now we all use authority. When on your books, we share an endorser. Bob Cialdini is on the cover of both of our books. So and that's using authority. Like what better authority than the person who pretty much invented the science of authority? But it's used in a lot of ways by having a celebrity or an expert endorse your product. But one I thought kind of clever use of that was when a receptionist answered the phone, just in transferring the call to somebody else. That the receptionist may be a dying breed these days, it seems, with the way we use our communications. But to me, that would be worth perhaps hiring a receptionist, even if you could automate that process just for that cue. So why don't you describe that technique?
Bas, this is
this is the Cialdini field.
Your favorite example.
Yeah, this example is a really interesting. This example indeed. So it was from a real estate agency, and when somebody called and they were asking, for example, to private housing, and then the receptionist transferred the phone. Okay, I give you Mike, and he will help you along. Then we'll make a small change. The small change was the receptionist introduced Mike credentials. So they said, okay, I'm going to transfer you to Mike. Mike has been in this world of working for over 20 years, and he helped more than 1,000 customers find their perfect house. When they did this, the number of appointments raised with 20%, and out of the appointments, the sales rate of the total appointments raised with 15%. So just by adding 2 sentences, this was a huge impact. Of course, we translate this to online, and so you can think on something like a confirmation of an appointment. The person you're going to speak to, you can already give the credentials there, which is a powerful tool.
Yeah, and of course now a lot of websites, they actually have this receptionist, which is the AI chatbot assistant.
Yeah.
And so there, I think you will see this technique in the future on websites where the bot does a handover to one of the experts and give this introduction and to raise authority. So that's also cool to see that all those maybe old techniques from the 70s are becoming very hot right now to be used by chatbots in one-to-one conversations that they have.
Yeah, I think another application for that, you gentlemen both speak at conferences online and in person, maybe again someday soon, I hope. And something that I've read from experts like Nick Morgan and Michael Port, who are speaking coaches and communications coaches, is to always have the person introducing you establish your credentials in a credible way. Don't just leave it to chance, like, send them a 2-page bio and then have them pick some random facts out of that bio. By having them give you the right introduction that will set up your talk and its relevance to the audience, that will increase your credibility, help people pay attention, particularly in the early going while you're establishing your credibility. But you can't do that yourself. You can't say, I'm an expert in XYZ, so please listen to me, because then people think you're a jerk. But if the person introducing you says that you have those credentials, then that's fine. So, whether we do it with a receptionist or a digital chatbot or a person who's introducing us, even in an in-person networking event. You know, if you've got a wingman who's going to introduce you to somebody, you know, they should do so in a way that will set your credibility up for, you know, whatever it is that that person that you're being introduced to, or that group that you're being introduced to, will appreciate.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, it's interesting.
Did you see our webinar, or you can still see the recording? Guess what? We actually asked somebody to introduce us before we are on stage. So
right.
Yeah, we took advantage of this principle.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense because you know, there are certain things that a person cannot really say about themselves. You know, they can try working around it and maybe giving some examples that would establish their credibility, but it's really helpful if somebody else does that, regardless of the venue, whether it's digital, in person, or whatever. So what are some of the other maybe more unique applications of, say, Cialdini principles that you've found work in this digital world? And one thing I had to mention too that's really nice about the book is a lot of your examples are using mobile screens or simulated mobile screens, not necessarily screenshots, but rather than just this sort of traditional website look, a lot of them are little digital phone looks.
Yeah. Thanks for noticing that. There was we saw a lot of books that we love from 5-6 years ago feel already outdated because they use like real screenshots from websites from that time. So we really decide, okay, we want to make something that goes for like 10 years. So we use wireframes, a more abstract form, and also try to do a 50-50 mix of desktop and mobile screens. So that's very
that's really excellent because, you know, so often too the interface is quite different in the two devices. You just can't do the same things on a big laptop screen or even expanded desktop screen versus what you're going to have on a little phone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the advantage as well. And also, like, having the wireframe allows you to leave out all the like non-relevant details, so you can really communicate a principle very fast by
it gets dated a little bit more slowly too than you look at last year's website and you say, yeah, that looks kind of old now, but the wireframes are more generic. But what are some of the other maybe more surprising examples or techniques that you've found work really well?
Yeah, so actually what I'm most proud of is our section about prompts, because like many books about persuasion, the word prompt is maybe not even mentioned. And it's also because usually when it's about persuasion, it's between two people talking to each other. So yeah, somebody is already prompted by a question or by a conversation. So that's maybe less relevant in those settings. But online, it's the most important thing. It's because you open your screen and you're like bombarded with different things that prompt you to do this or that. So that's why we started with this chapter, and we said, yeah, in order to be the winning prompt, you can use one of our proven prompt strategies, which sounds really cool, I think. And
yours.
So we have four.
Let me interrupt one second here and just remind our audience that BJ Fogg used to call what he now calls a prompt a trigger. So if you're familiar with the older versions of the behavior model, this is also the trigger. But anyway,
it's the trigger, yeah. And I think he changed the name because it's people. I did a lot of workshops, but people have a hard time understanding what a prompt is, in the behavior model. And they think a prompt is that's something that motivates me, or some idea that brings me on an idea to do a behavior. It's actually just a signal, something in the outside world, an icon or a word or a subject line or an ad or a button or a header that activates you to do an online behavior. So that's, if you understand that concept, I think, yeah, you took already a big step into online persuasion. So, but yeah, you were asking about principles. So yeah, one principle that I like is the simple question strategy, and this is that we found out just by our own experience mainly, that if you ask somebody a simple question like on a web page or somewhere in your application with like 3 or 4 answering buttons, a closed question, so to speak, you get a lot of response. In many cases, more than any other way of trying to prompt them. And somehow people really, if they read a question, hey, unconsciously, it's a simple question, as you read it automatically. They have this like urge, irresistible urge to answer, to press one of these buttons, and then of course you take over the screen and you can take them to the next step in your persuasive journey. So yeah, this is one principle that I'm really fond of using.
It would be great, Joris, if you explained the case you've done with where you won the conversion rate optimization award for the Dutch.
Yeah, it's you see it now more and more. So in emails, especially when you ask your customers to write a review, of course you can write them a message and then say, "Hey, please, your opinion is important, and click here to write a review." You can also just start with a question like, "Hey, did you like it?" And then you have 3 buttons: yes, no, or as expected, of better than expected, of disappointing, whatever. But having these 3 buttons staring at you makes it for many people irresistible to click. And then we know, of course, from Cialdini, if you've taken the first small step, you're more likely to take the next step. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we did it. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, you talk about these small steps as being really important, and that makes a huge amount of sense.
Yeah, we had a struggle because Cialdini calls it like commitment and consistency, and BJ Fogg calls it baby steps. And this is where really the 2 frameworks meet each other. And so we had a fight. Just shall we call it? How should we call this chapter? But because BJ Fogg model is so important, we call the chapter baby steps. Also, I think it's easier for people to pronounce and to remember. But it has to do with, if you can make somebody take a baby step, then you're halfway actually.
Mm-hmm. What's sort of a micro commitment strategy? I've got one slide. One person who's advocated this is Ryan Levesque, a digital marketer, wrote a book called Ask about gathering information about customers from surveys and actually using those as a part of the sales funnel process. But he talks about micro commitments, and it very much mirrors what you talk about in there, which is start with a simple, non-threatening question. Don't ask people for their personal information right away, because they will not give that to you. They'll be intimidated. But if you ask them for some very simple questions that don't reveal personal information, they don't find threatening, as each time they answer another question, they're increasing their commitment to this process. And I've got a slide in some of my speech decks that shows a process like this. I think it may be one of Ryan's, I'm not sure, but it's very much like his if it's not his, about assessing what kind of a tennis player you are. And it starts off with just one simple question: are you male or female? Maybe in 2020 that question is more complicated, but
it's threatening.
At least at the time this was written, that was a reasonable question. And it goes through a couple of those, just one per screen. So you're flipping through these screens with almost no effort, no thought. You're not intimidated at all. And eventually get to the ones that are more complicated. They require a little bit more reading. But I took all those questions and I pasted them together in one big form. And it was a horrendous form. If a customer ever looked at that and said, should I fill out this form? They'd look and it'd, go from top to bottom, and they'd say, no, that looks like way too much effort. In fact, there was some work done using, I forget what, some kind of neuromarketing technique from a company called SynapBox that I've been affiliated with. And they found that when people are presented with a web form, before they complete the first box, they tend to scroll up and scroll down to see how long it is and what's involved. I mean, that's another barrier to these micro commitments. You know, when you're using a micro commitment strategy, they can't really see what's ahead. Eventually you learn. Like, I don't do hotel surveys anymore because I know that even though they start off with a simple question, eventually they get into these really long things that, you know, have bubble charts with 10 different lines and 10 different rating levels. And it's like, it's awful. But anyway, that's, you know, it's such a simple application. And I like the fact that you point out that's where Fogg and Cialdini intersect too, that they both sort of meet at that point. It's great.
Yeah, it's crucial in behavior design, in persuasion, to be able to, and it's also creative. You have to, as a designer, you have to try to come up with good, smart baby steps that are safe, non-threatening, fun, and that really, you know, it's the start of your conversation or your journey. So it's extremely important to put all your efforts into that first step.
I wrote my entire book, Friction, about pretty much the ability step in Fogg behavior model, about how making things easier makes more of those things happen, or vice versa. And one of the things that I didn't really talk about that you mentioned in the book, or I didn't spend enough time on it, is the setting the expectation of effort. Which, you know, we talked about, okay, well, if somebody sees a super long form, they're just going to say, no, I'm not going to do that. But then there are more sophisticated people who may, so I've seen this kind of form before. They start off simple, but then it ends up, you know, 15 minutes later, I'm still answering questions. So by setting that expectation of effort, if it's a 2-minute process, tell people it's a 2-minute process, assuming that's reasonable. I've gotten emails from people saying, Roger, I just need 15 minutes of your time to complete this survey. It's like, no, I'm not going to give you 15 minutes of my time. Sorry. But so that's setting an expectation of effort that is not a good expectation. But if you have a very short process, if you know it's going to be low effort, tell people up front, because otherwise they might not even take that first little baby step.
So I think this is the way to go. So make it as short as possible, and then, you know, exceed people's expectations. But when you do that, it's also good to say in the beginning, hey, this really only takes 30 seconds or 3 steps. That's also important, because people have negative expectations about everything in these days, after being fooled so many times online. So it's really good to set those expectations.
You know, something else you talk about are decision aids. You know, I think probably most of our audience members are familiar with the paradox of choice, how when there's too much choice, that can simply be paralyzing, can be intimidating for customers, and they'll take no action at all. And explain a little bit about decision aids in the digital world, and how brands can help those decision processes along, you know, and sort of limit that paradox, at least reduce the effect of the paradox of choice.
So that's good that you mentioned it, because like we're talking about ability, making things easier, and most people think about copy and reducing steps and all kinds of those things. But actually, every time you have to make a choice during a checkout, or when you're buying a product online, or subscribing for you have to choose which package. That's the hard thing. That's where your brain explodes. Like, which one will I take? And it's a very difficult process. And I was just in a shop. I had to buy this microphone because you told me I couldn't use the one from my laptop. I had only half an hour, and that was a great experiment. Like, under stress, under time pressure, and I hated it, but I had to buy it. But if I was online, I would just go, you know, postpone the decision, because there was no way I could choose which microphone was the best for me. So luckily there was a sales guy, and he was just saying, this one is the best sold. So I took this one based on social proof. But just giving people cues on which option to take, which is the best for you. This is one of the most important things in making the online journey easier. And decision aids, so just telling this choice for this microphone is for a podcast, or there on no box they could have said it's for Apple, Macintosh, and PC. Like there were all kinds of microphones that didn't have that. Just say, yeah, it works on a PC. But yeah, and then you start. Oh no, isn't PC, Mac, is that PC or not? So yeah, I think that's decision aid. It doesn't have to be a wizard or some funky tool, but it's just
Amazon doesn't use wizards, but they are very effective. I mean, if you think about choice, Amazon would seem to be the ultimate example of paradox of choice, because they have millions of products. Any category, microphones, they've probably got 10,000 microphones, but they have all these decision aids that they incorporate. They'll flag something as a bestseller. So you've got social proof. They use their star ratings and the number of ratings too. So if you see something that's 4.7 stars and there's 3,000 reviews, that's telling you, first of all, this is a popular product. So you've got social proof there, but you're also getting the sort of wisdom of crowds that this is a better product. Then they will do things like say, this is Amazon's choice. And presumably that's a little bit of authority. And they're saying, like, we've analyzed all of the products that we carry and looked at the variables that you don't have time to look at. And somehow, hopefully it's not because this is the most profitable product for us, but they give you Amazon's choice. And usually if you compare that to some of the other choices, it does look like a pretty good choice. Typically they've got good reviews, they've got some good sales volume there. So you know that it's hasn't been influenced by just a few reviews, or the product is simply too new to have any sort of thorough feedback. And they, of course, they sort the product various ways, and then they provide all these filter aids so that you can then you can filter by price, you can filter by brand, by, depending on the product, all kinds of characteristics, if you're buying a monitor, screen diameter or whatever. So, they can take what would seem to be an unimaginable amount of choice and really drill it down for you. Not that you can't occasionally get lost in searching for product at Amazon. I certainly have, but
it's all really about trust, isn't it? Like nobody wants to compare stuff. And also when you look at web analytics, really the portion of people that actually using these compare tools is really small. It's like 1% in that order of magnitude. But if they trust you, you say, this is the best choice. And maybe you give one reason. This is because this microphone is good for streaming, and if it falls from your table, it doesn't break. Then I'm happy. I don't need to have this whole specification table. I don't care. I don't know anything about microphones. I just need to have a good feeling about my own decision, that I made inform my decision. So it's very irrational. And building trust and giving just some simple reasons, social proof, can really help people, make these choices and feel good about it. Because most people have choice regret after they bought something. This shouldn't happen.
And it depends on your use too, because if you are going to use a microphone occasionally for recording podcasts, all you want is something is going to work. If you were about to set up a podcast studio in your home, then you would probably have a different buying process. You would probably dig deeper into the reviews. You would look for some expert advice. You'd look for some authority references. Do any big name podcasts?
It's also, if there was only one microphone in that shop, I would have just bought it. And it's also like the fear of missing out. Like, there's 10 different ones, and and you start to actually, the first time in your life, you start to think about microphones at that moment. This is very crucial information when you design your choice set.
And so do you have any thoughts for how people can analyze their digital customers' experience or digital users' experience, where everybody has free or very inexpensive tools at their disposal? Anybody can put Google Analytics on their website or their app. There's so many tools. What sort of an approach do you recommend for people who want to go, obviously, beyond, say, okay, this is some good advice I'm getting in this book. Now, how can I see if this is actually working, or how can I see if my customers are doing what I think they're doing?
Yeah, that's the multi-million-dollar question. There's no one method of investigation that's actually good enough. So what I always say is you have to take like 5 or 6 different angles or views on your data, on what's happening, like web analytics, but also try to talk to some customers, interception questions, interviews, and then try to combine it and see the big picture in that data. So what you see a lot is that people are really focusing on one tool like web analytics, and then they have this whole team of 12 people asking themselves, why do people don't go from this page to this? There's a big drop off. Oh, and they go there and they don't have a clue what's happening. They don't even look at the design. They just look at Google Analytics and they only see the name of the page. And I say, here, look at this page, and then try to imagine yourself there.
Right. Well, that's where you find your clue, though. By looking at the analytics, you see that there's that drop off occurring. That then gives you the information you need to go back and analyze what's going on. Because otherwise, I mean, if you looked at it purely from a design perspective, even a smart design perspective, you might not see that happening because, we all know as designers, we see something as being very obvious. Clearly, when you want to do X, you simply press this button here. But for the first time user, they may not see that button. They may see other stuff that looks like it's clickable. Who knows? But it's hard for anybody to analyze, I think, their own.
And designers see problems that are not problems. Like this font is not our font. We have to change it, or this picture is so outdated, and they all agree that this is the problem. But when you look at data, there's nothing wrong. Maybe you have like a 99% click-through rate on that page. So you better focus your efforts on something else.
Right. So, and I think A/B testing too, or some type of testing, tools can be very inexpensive for that. And I know Booking, of course, has an entire experimentation department, but even small businesses, if you've got some kind of volume to your website or to your mobile app, you can conduct very simple experiments. You can use email to conduct very simple experiments to see, what messages resonate, because for all the advice that you can get in books from Cialdini's to Fogg's to mine to yours, I mean, all that is good advice. It's based on sound science, but nothing is going to work 100% of the time. You're always going to have a situation where social proof, that social proof didn't work. Either the number isn't convincing, or maybe it's people don't want to think other people are using this product. They want to think it's theirs alone. You don't see luxury product manufacturers talking about how many customers they have. So
and that's
it's always
or
good to
just
test.
Exactly, because it's also in the book, like if you talk about increasing motivation, it's always about adding content to boost motivation. So social proof takes up screen real estate, and people have to read it and process it. So anything you add to boost motivation hurts ability, the other axis. So it might as well that there's no effect from your motivation boost, but there's a negative effect from making your site more complex and harder to read. So that's why you say you always have to test this stuff and what you're doing. Totally agree.
And there are easy tools, free, for example, Google App Optimize. It's a free tool where you can easily start testing and do your first baby steps there, finding out what your data has to show, of course.
Well, I could geek out on this stuff all day, but I don't think we can all afford that time. So let me ask you, how can people find you and your work and your ideas online? Bas, you go first.
Yes, you can go to our website, onlineinfluence.com, and you'll find a lot of information about what we do and about us. And you can find me for the best on LinkedIn as Bas Wouters CMCT. A lot of Bas Wouters out there, but there's only one Bas Wouters CMCT. So they can find me there on LinkedIn.
Great. And yours?
Yeah, just my name, Joris Groen, Joris Groen on LinkedIn. And go to onlineinfluence.com to see where you can order the book and maybe subscribe for our courses that are still developing. But also I'm very excited about that to actually it's the video version of our book with lots more examples where people can just sit back, relax, and watch me explain it.
Great. Well, I really did enjoy the book, and it is full of very practical information for our audio listeners. I'm holding it up right now, and it is available in English. So let me remind our audience members that all the resources we talked about on the show, as well as links to the various places that you mentioned, will be on the show notes page at rogerdooley.com/podcast. There will be text, audio, and video versions there. So, gentlemen, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Roger,
Thank you. It was a real honor. I've always been a really big fan of your work, so I really appreciate that you invited us.